Welcome back to 7 Tasmania's coverage of the 2024 state election. We're in the tally room now, and it is Richard Herr with me. Richard, we've got some results coming through, and we need to chat about them pretty quickly. So let's take a look at Bass and what has been happening there.
With Bass, as expected, Michael Ferguson is certainly leading the pack there, but it's interesting that Michelle O'Byrne and Janie Finlay are sharing the vote between them. That bodes well for Labor getting 2. Michael Ferguson will certainly elect a second Liberal on his ticket. And the Greens are actually, although Cecily isn't doing as well as she might like, she's still going to give the Greens half a quota, and the rest will be topped up. We can see that here in this figure. So 3 seats to the Liberals in Bass, 2 to Labor, 1 to the Greens. And Jackie Lambie is going to be struggling, but is in the hunt. She needs to pick up some there.
Let's go to Braddon now, which takes in the west coast, the northwest coast of Tasmania. Jeremy Rockliff, as you predict, out in front. But what else have you seen there?
Well, it's interesting that Felix Ellis is polling so well. That guarantees them very likely to the 3 seats, along with Roger Jench's support. Craig Garland is interesting there because he is leading.
We need to get to Clark, Richard. Right. So, yep, we're on a tight time frame here.
Enough,
let's go to Clark.
Okay. The interesting thing here is that Clark is going to go the way we thought, probably 2-2 and 2. And the question is with Kristie Johnston that she is behind, or she's in front of Sue Hickey.
Franklin, as we can see, is there. We don't have enough time to get there. No. We need to go back to the biggest. Welcome back to the tally room in Hobart for 7 Tasmania's coverage of the 2024 state election. I have Richard Herr with me, and the people of Tasmania have gone to the polls to decide their next government, and the election is really rolling at the moment, Richard. And let's drill down into Bass, because there's been some wild things happening there.
Yeah, well, statewide we've got about a third of the vote in, so we're getting some meaningful figures. We're looking at Michael Ferguson there with about 1.5 quota in his own right, which is going to be a very useful figure for the ticket down the party line. So we still find that Michelle O'Byrne and Janie Finlay are splitting the vote between them, but they will accumulate surpluses, preferences, but they're not going to get a surplus. So that's it for Labor. 2 seats in Bass. The Liberals will hold out for 3, but they will rely on other preferences. The Greens more likely to pick up a seat in Bass. Jackie Lambie is going to be struggling. We've got over, as I say, a third of the vote in. They needed to do a bit better than that at this stage of the night.
Rob Fairs is going to take Simon Wood's position, maybe, because Simon Wood was right down the pecking order. Rob Fairs doing pretty well in Bass.
He's scoring very well, and that puts him in line for, again, accumulating preferences, not necessarily where we got him there. Oh, he's doing even better than the last time we looked. So, yeah, he will take a seat from Simon Wood unless the Libs get 3 seats. Simon Wood is still third on that ticket as far as we got it. So he's not out of it. It's just that he's in a more vulnerable position than he would like to be.
The absence of Peter Gutwin, the gold mine of votes, is really having an effect, isn't it?
It does. It does seem to be that. Well, I mean, it's always useful to have a party leader who has long coattails that brings in a lot of extra votes, because those get redistributed down the ticket to other people on the party line.
So, well, we're in a few hours. We might get an early picture on who will form government. So we don't really know exactly what's going on there. We're going to have a chat to Michael Ferguson fairly shortly.
Yeah.
But,
if we're looking at the state at the moment, first of all, our exit poll is pretty good. It picked that the swing against the government was somewhere in between 10 and 12%, and it's on 11% plus now. That suggests that, you know, the government aren't going to get the number of seats they need to hold on to power. The question is who we're going to have to deal with. Now, the Greens are putting in a strong claim here. They've got 3 or 4 seats already. Labor is struggling more than I expected from our exit poll. They still need 3 or 4 seats to be close to where we expect them to be at the end of the night.
Let's go to Michael Ferguson, who is standing by in Launceston, and he joins us now. Michael, good evening to you. Thanks for coming on board on our coverage. And Michael, those votes that have been lost from Peter Gutman, just affecting your overall performance in Bass?
G'day Michael, and good evening to your viewers. Well, we're here in Liberal headquarters with a small number of our big army that worked the ground and supported our campaign and our team of 7 candidates. And look at them behind me, they don't even look worn out. But Michael, you know, we have seen a change, but we're still the most competitive party in the Parliament on the early numbers. And look, obviously we're all watching to see what happens from here, but in Bass, looking good for 3 seats.
Well, the man standing just over your right shoulder there, Rob Fairs, you've got to be pleased with the way that he's performed in this count so far, looking pretty reasonable at the moment.
Really happy with Rob Fair's performance. He's run a great ground game. So have all of our candidates. Rob's looking very solid tonight, and I really want to congratulate him and our Liberal family who got behind him, as well as that Simon Wood who's polling really well. But all of our 7 candidates, Julie, Sarah, Richard, Chris, as well, I want to give a mention to. We've worked as quite a family, quite a unit to really pump home the message of the importance of the Liberal plan. We keep talking about it, the 2030 Strong Plan, because it was always about reminding Tasmanians of the deep hole that we took Tasmania out of after the Labor Green government disaster, and how we've turned Tasmania around, but importantly, how it's all about looking to the future. We can make Tasmania even stronger going forward, knowing just how vulnerable the national economy is at the moment. So couldn't be more pleased with the team and the Tasmanian public in particular in Bass. They have responded to us, and yes, we have seen the vote come backwards, but we're miles in front of Labor. I don't know what they must be thinking, and only getting 25% of the vote is really interesting.
All right, Michael, thanks very much. A long way to go in the count yet, but thanks for joining us from Launceston.
There is, Michael. You're most welcome. Thank you.
A very positive Michael Ferguson there.
Yeah,
Richard?
well, I mean, he should be. I mean, the fact is that the absence of Peter Gutman isn't the reason why the Liberal Party is 12 points down. I mean, it's going for a 4th term of government is always going to be hard, and the Premier knew that. He called the early election knowing that, but he felt that the people of Tasmania needed to decide, and there's, as Michael Ferguson said, they're still the most preferred party in the state, even though they're not going to be the major party in the state.
All right, let's take a look at the next electorate, and it'll be Braddon. So Jeremy Rockliff doing pretty nicely there, as you would expect. Felix Ellis as well, but what else do you see? Craig Garland is probably the one there. Shane Broad, tell us about what's happening there.
Well, looking at Craig Garland, he is down to only about half a quota the last time I saw that, so he is actually drifting down. He needs to pick up, and it's hard to see where his extra votes are going to come from. The Jackie Lambie network, as you see now, have exceeded his tally up to now is by something like, 500 or so votes. So it's really a problem for Craig Garland. We were expecting that he would do better. He's still not doing badly, but he's under half a quota now, and that's going to make it difficult for him. The Greens' preferences are going to be needed by Labor to get them into their 2nd seat. So I'm not sure there's a lot of free preferences lying about for Craig Garland to get over the line with. Jackie Lambie's network is doing well enough that they would expect probably to be able to claim that seat in much toward the end of the evening. I think that we'll be able to say, well, yep, that's very likely to be a Jackie Lambie's.
We'll go to Clark. We'll go to Clark now. So Vicar Bailey, he's the bolter for the Greens. So pretty interesting there. Ella Haddad doing well for Labor. So what else do the numbers here tell you?
Well, again, Vicar Bailey and Helen Burnett together are showing that the Greens are going to get 2 seats in Clark. Ella Haddad, the interesting thing there is she's pulling so much better than Josh Woolley. When Josh Woolley was seen as a possible leader for that, he would want to do better than that if he was to try and claim the leadership after tonight.
Sue Hickey down the bottom there. There's
Yep.
the party quota.
Yep. So you can see the interesting thing is since we've last looked at it, the Greens have dropped down a bit, but the Labour surplus would be enough to get them across to 2 seats. So it'd be 2-2 and 2-2-2 and 1. I think we're still looking at that as the most likely outcome in Clark.
Franklin will be next for a look, and Rosalie Woodruff, really,
Yes.
she's completely at Greens again.
Yes,
So
yep.
Dean Winter and David O'Byrne has had a bit of a kick since the last time we saw him.
Yes. Yes, David is doing, what is that? I forget what we'll look at the progressive quotas here, but O'Byrne he's picked up about, 2/10 of a quota since last time. So with 2/3 of the vote still to come, I think he will get across the line. And there will be surpluses that he will accumulate. The question for David O'Byrne is that the Greens are closer to a second quota in Franklin than he is to a first quota. So there's still a lot of anxiety for all the players in Franklin at the moment.
Let's go to Lions now, and our last one for a look, and Rebecca White. Well, that's a show of strength from your Labor leader, who's really leading the way in this poll.
She is, and she, on the figures that we're getting at the moment, I mean, she's still showing herself to be the party leader, and whether that she's willing to remain party leader will depend on ultimately the wash-up. But it doesn't look like she's going to have a victory tonight for the party, and that will open things up. But her personal vote has done very well. So we're looking at the Liberals possibly having very likely to have 3 seats in Lions. Labour certainly 2. The Greens possibly 1, and Jackie Lambie 1. But we're stuck here with some very close figures. I think the Greens are closer to, certainly they're closer to a quota in Lions than the Labour Party is to getting a 3rd seat. So they would expect to cannibalize part of that Labour vote to get them over the line. The question is then, where does Jackie Lambie get her extra votes?
And the John Tucker vote, just well down.
Yes, they're not showing it. Neither of the two defectors are really showing up as winners out of this. They both, they knew their political careers were going to be over when they went to the crossbenches, but I think they hoped that they would get more support from the public to say, well, we appreciate that you had principles and stood up for them.
We've got about 40 seconds before we need to go back to Sydney and Essendon.
Yep.
But where do you see this going? We're obviously not looking at majority.
No, we're not looking at majority, and according to what we've got here, we've got something like 12 seats still to be declared, to be strengthened so enough that we can start saying allocate them. So there's a lot of looseness yet in what we have, but it's not looseness that's going to consolidate about one of the two major parties. That's
all we've got time in this particular segment. We'll take you now. Welcome back to the Hobart Tally Room for the 2024 state election, and what a wild ride it has been. Richard Herr, no more emphasised more than in Clark. Tell us what's happening in Clark.
Well, Clark is almost a microcosm of the state. It's showing all the uncertainties that we have, and that typically only seat 7 is up for grabs. This is going to be 6 and 7. So as we look at it, the Liberals are going to have 2, Labour are going to have 2. The Greens are closer to 2 than either of the two major parties, so they are likely to get. But then look at the Johnston and Hickey vote. Both are struggling. I think Sue Hickey will be out, but it's not clear that Kristie Johnston is going to get across the line either. So there's a lot to play for, and we just can't pick, as I say, those last two seats at this stage.
Let's go to the State of the House and
There you see
tell
it.
us what you see there.
Well, we see that Labor are going to have the 10, and we think they might get up to 12. The Liberals have 13, and they might get up to 15. After that, the Greens have 3 or 4. There's a bit of doubt about the fourth one. And Jackie Lambie looks most likely to pick up 1 seat, but then we're in doubt for 7, and that's more than 1 seat in every electorate. It's a difficulty to pick that final division, but we can be certain is the blue line is not going to get all the way across to the middle.
All right, so thanks for that, Richard. It is a wild ride, as I mentioned, and certainly nothing is a certainty at the moment. So it is pretty close. Let's go back to the SCG.
After he was felled.
Thank you, everybody. As a deep reflection on the lands we stand tonight, I want to recognise the Palawa people of Lutruwita and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any Aboriginal people who are in the room with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot that's unclear about tonight, but it is clear that Tasmanians have voted to reject the Liberals. It's going to be a long night and likely a long few weeks until we know the exact makeup of the next parliament. Thank you to the people of Tasmania who have chosen to give their support to Labor candidates this election. I'm proud to see so many Labor candidates across the state have been supported by their communities to be elected to represent them, and on their behalf I say thank you. I'm really proud of the campaign that Labor ran. I'm really proud of our candidates, I'm really proud of our volunteers, and I'm really proud of the plan that we laid out for the Tasmanian community this election. A plan that is grounded in putting Tasmanians first. There are still votes to be counted, but what is clear is the Liberal Party will not be getting a majority. Tasmanians have humbled a Premier who called an early election expecting to be returned in majority. Tasmanians have clearly voted for change. And when the Liberals called this early election, the second in 3 years, they called it not because they wanted to address the cost of living, not because they wanted to start turning around our health system, not because they wanted to give young people hope that they might one day own their own home, but because they couldn't even work with people from their own party. Which means that dealing with a crossbench the size the Tasmanian community looks to have returned in this election will be a very difficult task for them to manage with respect. Because respect requires an honest appreciation that the voters cannot be sent back to do it again, and that each member of the crossbench represents a constituency that has to be listened to. Humble people don't speak of a coalition of chaos whenever they don't get their own way, or claim a victory when the results aren't clear. They pick up the phone and they talk to people. Strong but humble leaders accept the responsibility of making the parliament that the Tasmanian people have chosen work for all of our communities and for all of our regions. The final makeup of this parliament will not be known for some time, but it is clear that Jeremy Rockliff will not be in a position to do so without the support of at least 4 members of the crossbench. Whether he can ultimately remain as Premier will be up to the members who are ultimately elected. I want to recognise that tonight will be a difficult one for him, having called an early election demanding stability, and instead the Liberal Party have seen a massive drop in their primary vote. After 22 years in the Parliament and 10 as the Deputy Premier and as the Premier, Jeremy has given an enormous amount to this state, and I want to acknowledge that tonight and also thank him and his family for their contribution, because there would have been a lot of sacrifices given over those years. However, this election has been decisive in its message that there needs to be change. I'm proud of the fact that Labor has laid out a plan to take urgent action on the cost of living, to ensure that Tasmanians pay a Tasmanian price for Tasmanian power, to build more affordable childcare and provide free school lunches. We've laid out a plan to build more houses for people who need them, to make life easier for renters and to ensure the dream of home ownership is put back within the reach of Tasmanians who've lost hope. We've set out a plan to start repairing our health system, to train more nurses, more doctors, more paramedics, and to provide them with the infrastructure and support that they need to care for Tasmanians. And I acknowledge that on tonight's results, Labor will need the support of the Parliament to implement these plans. And I've said that we won't be entering into any coalitions, and there will only be Labor ministers in a government that I lead. And these things and our plans are not up for negotiation. But whether we get the chance to implement our agenda will depend on how things play out over the next few weeks. But tonight it is clear that the Tasmanian community has rejected the past and wants change. It is over conflict for conflict's sake. This election outcome requires us to respect those who differ in their political colour, and Tasmanians have told us loudly through this result that they want a government and a parliament that works for them. Tonight, I would also like to convey my deep thanks to every single person who supported me personally and the Labor Party as we've campaigned throughout this election. Firstly, I want to thank my family and my friends for their unwavering support. Thank you so much for always standing beside me and holding me up at times when it's been necessary. Thank you to my deputy, Anita Dow, who's been a rock. Anita is a marvellous, hard-working person who has put her heart and soul into this campaign, and I'm incredibly proud to call her a friend. Thank you to my team, and in particular to my Chief of Staff, Marcus Atkinson. Thank you for your hard work and your dedication, which has been such a strength to me and all of us as you've led from the front. To the Acting State Secretary, Jared Moore, and to the former State Secretary, Stuart Benson. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment to our movement, for the many, many, many hours that you put in and the effort you gave to make sure that our campaign was as strong as it was. It is a privilege to see some of your faces in the room tonight. Whether you've been successful tonight and whether it's still to be decided or whether you haven't quite made it, I want to thank you for putting yourself forward. Our democracy depends on people like you. And by putting your hand up, you've done a genuine act of public service and you've done our party proud. I want to thank the hundreds of Labor volunteers who've worked so hard across the state, talking to people, door knocking, letterboxing. You are symptomatic of how our movement works at a grassroots level to grow support, and I'm so proud of each and every one of you. Throughout the campaign, we've elevated the stories of Tasmanians who are demanding a better future. We stood in their lounge rooms, we stood in their businesses, we sat around their kitchen tables. We helped share the story of Tasmania as it is and as it could be. And we asked for their support to help change the government so that we could deliver a better future for our state. Can I finish by saying just one last thing? Tonight's result demonstrates that there's been a significant shift in the way politics operates in Tasmania, and we can expect to see this happen again and again. It is very likely that Tasmania will continue to elect minority governments, particularly with a 35-seat parliament. It is also clear that people voted for change this election. We'll wait to see how the dust settles and for the final results to be determined. And Labor will be ready to work with the Parliament to implement our agenda and our plan for a better future for Tasmania if that is the will of the people. Thank you.
Well, there is Rebecca White and talking to the faithful. Welcome back to the Hobart Tally Room. Michael Maney and Richard Herr with you. And Rebecca White, what did you make of that speech from Rebecca White? Always speaks beautifully, doesn't she? And
yes.
She has a lovely sort of way about her. What did you make of the content?
Well, I think it was a bit begrudging about the fact that the government will be returned. But she did accept that there was a vote for change, and she accepted they weren't going to be necessarily part of that change except through their representations in Parliament. So it wasn't as positive as the Premier's was, but then she had less to be positive about, really. How
was the vote for Labor, in your opinion? Up, down? How did it spread?
Well, if you look at the improvement that they had, it was a modest improvement, but they narrowed the gap with the Liberals significantly more than the number of seats that they're going to win. So in that sense, she's certainly right to say that there's a rebuilding. The scope for rebuilding gives Labor something to look forward to, but they'll be rebuilding from opposition still, not from the government benches.
And the Greens have obviously done extremely well in this election, or they've done well enough to be able to cause a bit of a thorn in the side, haven't they?
Well, they've done well enough that there's the government, the Liberal government, will have to rely on the Greens on the crossbench. It will be a lot easier for the Premier if he only has to deal with the Greens. He may not like it, but it's a lot easier to deal with a single party than to have 3 or 4 different independents and others to deal with. So in one sense, we thought earlier in this evening, when the figures were coming out as they were, that it might be his worst nightmare that he would have 15, the Greens would have 4, and that was the only choice he had. But he said, well, we had lemons, but we're making lemonade. And that's the way he approached it.
Well, speaking of the Premier, a little earlier he launched onto stage. He wished his mum a happy birthday, which was a wonderful thing to do. He thanked all of the candidates for their contribution throughout this election campaign. And then he said this.
And there is still clearly much counting to do and to go as we move forward over the course of the next week or more. But 2 things are very clear tonight. First, an historic 4th consecutive win for the Liberal Party of Tasmania. This has never happened before in the great state of Tasmania. Congratulations, team. And let's be clear, the Liberal team has clearly gained the most votes this election and the most seats by a large margin. So well done and thank you. And secondly, Tasmanians have delivered a very clear message. And I want to assure each and every Tasmanian that we've heard it. And I thank you for it. But Tasmanians have not voted for a change of government. Make no mistake, this has been a very poor result for the Labor Party of Tasmania. It looks like their lowest vote, primary vote, ever. Labor hasn't got enough seats to form a cabinet, let alone a government. But as I said before, but as I've said at the beginning of this campaign, from day one, we will now work with the Parliament that Tasmanians voted for today. And I will seek a new government, to form a new government, to give Tasmanians the certainty and the stability that they deserve, and to deliver our 2030 strong plan for Tasmania's future. Finally, can I say to all here tonight, in fact, every Tasmanian, it is incumbent upon the new Parliament to work together, to put aside our differences to ensure that we work day in, day out for Tasmanians right across this beautiful state. This is the best place, not only in Australia, but indeed around the world, to live, to work and to raise a family. And I couldn't be prouder of Tasmania and Tasmanians. And my message is very clear. I love this place. I was born here. I'll always live right here in Tasmania, and I thank each and every Tasmanian for standing up to be counted today, and I look forward to the next 4 years, and I'm only going to get started. I'm only getting started right now, ladies and gentlemen. I love this job. Thank you all. I very much appreciate your time tonight, and thank you each and every Tasmanian. Thank you very much.
Well, there's plenty to unpack with all of that, isn't there, Richard?
Yes, yes. Well, what we saw is that the Premier, as I said, he's making lemonade out of the lemons, but there was a bit of relief in his voice. He accepted that there was a risk, and he says, well, we won. We're the largest party in the state. We're going to form government, and we'll start from there. It was a bit, I think it was disappointing in that sense that Beck White criticised the Premier, who actually restored the Parliament and took the gamble on an increased-sized Parliament, and saying this means our future is minority government. The fact is, over the last 100+ years, a third of Tasmanian governments have always been minority governments. But the longest minority government was a 5-year minority government that was the longest of any government. So we have at least now a Parliament that is a bit more workable, and now it's up to the Premier and the crossbenchers to make it work.
All right, so that is all we have just for the moment here from the tally room. We're hoping to hear from Rosalie Woodruff very soon, but we might go to Rosalie in a second. Let's go to Rosalie Woodruff, the Greens leader.
Yeah.
To see you all here. I want to acknowledge that we're standing here tonight on the land of Tasmania's first people, the Palawa Pakana. They've shaped this island's landscape for tens of thousands of years. And the Greens recognise that this is stolen land that was never ceded. And we're committed to returning lands, to truth-telling, to treaty and justice. I want to also acknowledge the work of the people on this campaign and start with Jeremy Rockliff and Rebecca White. As leaders, they have both done a huge job of work. And, you know, elections are tough for everybody, but also democracy is a wonderful thing. And on behalf of the Greens, I salute everybody who has had the courage to stand, party leaders, but also the candidates and the independents, people who had no notice that this election was going to be called, and that in itself was, you know, less than perfect from a democratic point of view. People have gone hard and they've given it their best. Well, what an election and what an exciting opportunity to fight for real change, and that is exactly how the Greens approached this election from day one. On behalf of the Greens, I want to thank everyone, all those Tasmanians who stood with us during this campaign and publicly shared their stories. Stella, who lost her mother on the ramp at the LGH. Glenn, a victim survivor, of conversion practices who travelled 2 whole days to come back to Tasmania to share his painful story. Chris, with his experience of homelessness, and Kelly and Eve, just 16 and 20, who also spoke about their housing struggles and why we desperately need youth homelessness services. Teresa Sainty, who shared the stories of Palawa people's lives in the remote southwest wilderness heritage area. The unions who fight every day. They have been at the forefront of desperate underfunding for a decade, and they feel the brunt every single day of the critical services that aren't provided, and the stories of Tasmanians who suffer real moral injury because they are forced to work under intolerable circumstances that they know are unsafe and inadequate for the work that they're employed to do. So HACSU, the CPSU, the ANMF and all the other unions, good on you for the work you do. And of course, who was there loudest and strongest? The incredible conservation movement of Tasmania, who stood in defence of the Liberal and Labor Party's attacks on our forests, relentless attacks on nature and the marine environment. The thousands of Tasmanians who joined us on the streets to march to end native forest logging and burning. So, collectively, all of these Tasmanian stories tell us why there's a problem, and our message from them that for this campaign that we have relayed is that we need change, and change is possible. It's been a momentous campaign, and we've deliberately focused on raising the issues that we want to fight for and staying out of the negative politics and negative campaigning. And through our work, we've made sure that critical issues were on the election agenda: free public transport, renters' rights, regulating short stay, stronger environment laws. We put them there. The Greens did that on behalf of Tasmanians. We were the only party to put forward a comprehensive plan to tackle ambulance ramping, to remove, yes, it's not easy, and that's why it's a 50-point plan and not a 3-word slogan. We were the only party to talk about how we can and we must remove fish farms from Macquarie Harbour and transition the Strawn workforce. The West Coast community deserves a better future, sustainable jobs for the long term. Also, we talked about future-focused jobs and nature tourism. And so this next term of Parliament, the Greens are going to push the next government to act on the Commission of Inquiry's recommendation and close Ashley Youth Detention Centre. To legislate for the protection of Aboriginal heritage, to give the EPA some real fangs, and to properly ban harmful conversion practices. I am a proud foundation member of the Tasmania Devils, like I'm sure so many other people in this room are, and I'm committed to defending our team and our colours, and the Greens will hold firm in standing up to the whimsies of the AFL. We know having a love of football doesn't have to equal support for a stadium. This generation of Tasmanians needs a parliament of leaders working to tackle the health, housing and unfolding climate crisis. They don't need a $1 billion stadium when we have a perfectly good one at York Park. And that's where the heart of AFL and AFL football should remain permanently. So as we suspected before tonight, things aren't cut and dried right now at the moment, but they are sure looking good for the Greens. In Bass, it's looking strong for the compassionate and incredible Cecily Rossell. She is an incredible member of her community and she has such a kind, caring heart. In Lions, the tenacious Tabitha Badger.
And that's where we'll leave Rosalie Woodruff just for the moment. We need to take a break from the Hobart Tally Room. This is the 2024 election coverage here on 7. Back shortly. Welcome back to the Tally Room in Hobart for our 7 News coverage of the 2024 election. I have Richard Herr with me, and we're lucky enough to have independent in Clark, Kristie Johnston. Kristie.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. You're in a bit of a three-way tug of war in your seat in Clark.
Look, it's certainly looking very interesting, but the early indications are quite strong. So it looks like I'm sitting at about 0.6, 0.7 of a quota. So it will come down to preferences, as we know for many of the seats in this election, but I'm feeling very positive this stage.
How have you seen the whole night? It's been a bit of a roller coaster, hasn't it? There's been a lot of strange things happening in the county.
Look, it certainly has. It's been a really interesting night, and I think it's probably reflective of the way the campaign has been. It's been a very different election this time around. The community feeling very differently about it, and certainly about what the make-up has been.
Where do you think your preferences are going to come from, Kristie?
Look, I think they'll come strongly from the other independents. Certainly there's been a move in the electorate that they want to see that independent voice there. So we had 7 candidates in Clark who were independent, so I suspect they'll be very strongly. I've been very vocal on animal justice and animal welfare issues, so from the minor parties like the Animal Justice Party, but also, you know, I align strongly with a lot of the Greens issues as well, so I suspect there'll be some preferences from those as well.
Do you think it hurt that Josh Willey decided to switch from the upper house, because that gave you Sue Hickey and Josh Willey all going for your heartland area in Glenorchy and the northern suburbs there?
Look, I suppose because we were moving to 7 seats, there was always 2 extra ones up for grabs. Certainly, you know, Josh is strong out in the heartland in Glenorchy. There will be, you know, constituency does overlap the Glenorchy constituency where I'm probably most popular. You know, it's been interesting to see that Labor have managed to get back that extra seat that I took them off them initially in 2021. Yeah,
well, it still isn't clear that, you know, as I said, there's a 3-way tussle, so, but it will go down to these preferences. You're right. The minor parties will and independents will be disappearing first, because the party will generally are staying within the ticket. So well, I guess you've said who you think are going to come in your way.
But certainly, yeah.
And you'll need to get upwards of at least another 2/10 of a quota to make sure that you stay in front of the pack. That's basically what I think your first aim is at this stage.
And look, my scrutiny is out in the polling booths are telling me that I'm doing well on preference flow, just from looking at the counters that they're doing the primary. So that's given me some positivity as well.
Right.
Kristie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And look, good luck. Let's hope it all pans out for you.
Fingers crossed. Thank
and hopefully you have a lot of nerve calming. Whether it's whatever device
I'm
is, because you're going to need 2 weeks of being anxious, I'm afraid.
That's it.
All right, let's take a break now from the Hobart Tally Room. We'll be back soon with more from 2024 state election. Welcome Welcome back to Seven's coverage of the 2024 state election. We're in the Hobart tally room. I'm with Richard Herr, and Richard, we're going to have a quick buzz around all of the seats.
Fine.
And
Yep.
we'll start off with Bass, and we'll get our graphic up in a second or two. And there it is, Michael Ferguson, clearly, Michelle O'Byrne, Janie Finlay.
Yep.
Not much out of order there.
No, but as Rob Fairs, as a newcomer, has performed very, very well, and that you can see the other Simon Wood and Julie Sladden. They're looking like they're positioning the Liberals to pick up 4 in Bass, which they weren't necessarily counting on, and we weren't counting on it earlier. But they're going to get the 3. Sorry, they're going to get 3. Labor will get 2. The Greens are going to get 1, so that's a big fillip for them to return a seat in Bass. Jackie Lambie still is the most likely independent or new party to pick up a seat there. It's not certain. It'll be a struggle. It's a bit low in the quota lower in the quota than she would like, but it's the best position really to get that 7th seat.
And there's the swing, and considerable against the Liberals. The Peter Gutwin factor, maybe.
Well, yeah, it certainly looks it. We were surprised. At the exit poll, we had them down 20% in Bass, and we doubted the poll was correct, but it looks like on the ground that was the nature of the swing there.
So let's go to Braddon now, and this is in the west coast and northwest coast. Jeremy Rockliff, it's Jeremy and Daylight next, isn't it?
It is, but there will be enough for, as we'll see, 2 Labor will get back, 3 Liberals will get back, and then we're going to look at Craig Carlin, who everybody seemed to think had a good chance, is fading now. It seems unlikely, and Jackie Lambie is probably likely to get a 7th seat if the preferences go well. There we have the graphic now. It looks like 3, possibly 4 to the Liberals, 2 to Labor, and then 1 to Jackie Lambie.
Another 25% of the vote to be counted. So
yeah.
So you wouldn't probably see too much changing there.
Once you get past 50%. The trends are established. Then it's at the margins who gets the preference flow to make changes in the personnel, but not necessarily in the party standing.
Let's go to Clark. We just had Kristie Johnston on just a moment ago, and there's been a bit of a wild ride in Clark, hasn't there? So Ella Haddad, she's leading at 65% of the
Yeah, but
vote.
notice the way Josh Willey has picked up. Now, Josh Willey came down from the upper house to go for the lower house, and he stood in precise to be in for the 7th seat.
Sue Hickey looks like it's all over for
yes.
Sue.
No, that'll try again next time, but not this time.
So let's look at the quota, Richard. Labor.
Well, the Liberals too. Labor are halfway to a 3rd seat, which is surprising given what they did last time. But the Greens are a bit closer to a 2nd seat. The Kristie Johnston, the thing that she will be worried about or concerned with is that she's fractionally in front of the Greens for getting to her seat compared to the Greens getting a 2nd seat. But you see, once if the Labor preferences are distributed first, they go 3 quarters generally to the Greens, and that would put the Greens into the 2nd seat there.
Yeah, interesting in Clark. We'll go to Franklin now and have a look and see how that has panned out. We know Erica Betts, the newcomer in there, so to speak, but Rosalie Woodruff leads all comers there. Yeah,
there is a chance on those figures that both the sitting members may lose out to the returnees, as it were. Erica Betts from the Commonwealth and Jackie back to standing for the seat that she once held. David O'Byrne is struggling, but he's likely, if the preference flow goes well, he is not quite. We'll look at it here. He's only got 0.7 of a quota, and he needs to pick up. And when you look at it, the likely support, it'll come from Labor and the Greens. and it's going to be a struggle for him, but he's still reasonably well positioned. We're going to say 3 to, on these figures, we're going to say 3 to the Liberals, 2 to Labour. That gives us 5. 1 to the Greens, and then a fight between the Greens and David O'Byrne for that 7th seat.
O'Byrne is next. Let's finally take a look at Lyons and see what has been occurring in Lyons. We know that John Tucker, his vote is looks like he's off the scale there. So Rebecca White, look at that, 11,000. So tell us
as a leader, she's made a statement, but when we look at the quotas, when we come to the next graphic, the Liberals are going to get 3. Labour is going to get 2. The Greens are closer to their seat than anyone else, so we'd expect the Greens to pick up a seat in Lyons, and the Jackie Lambie network will be in a bit of a fight with the Labour Party and also Rands for a seat. It may be that it's possible for Labour to actually pick up a 3rd seat, but they won't be relying, typically they'd be relying on Green preferences, and it looks like the Greens are going to be in long enough to make sure that they're not the ones who are sacrificed for that 7th seat.
Thanks for that, Richard, and it has certainly been an interesting wild ride here tonight in the Hobart Tally Room. We'll come back shortly after a break, and we'll have a look at the state of the House and then wrap things up here from Hobart. Welcome back to the Tally Room in Hobart for the 2024 state election. You're on 7. And it has been a wonderful night here, a night of swings and a lot of reasonably weird things happening within the count. Joining me now is our state political reporter in Josh Duggan. Josh, you've been scooting around all of the speeches from the leaders. Tell us what you've made of it.
There were 3 very, very different speeches. Of course, we heard Jeremy Rockliff first, claiming that he's won a 4th term of government, and I guess the mood from people I've spoken to has been that it is probably a little bit premature. The count is still underway. Obviously, the Liberals have the most seats, I think everyone agrees with that, but it's still going to be incumbent on him to show where those 18 seats and the ability for him to govern are. Obviously, Jackie Lambie is looking at 1 or 2 seats here, and that will provide a bit of an opportunity for him to govern. And Kristie, Johnston and David O'Byrne, despite they're probably left-leaning, they might be willing to govern with him as well. In regards to what Beck White's speech was, I thought that kind of saying we're ready to govern in minority was perhaps the speech that she should have given at the start of this campaign, given we've seen a clear move away from the major parties in the vote for the Jackie Lambie network and the Greens, and the willingness to work with a crossbench, I think, could have potentially held them in a better stead instead of what really has been an election campaign where they haven't been able to make up any ground at all.
And Rosalie Woodruff, what did you make of Rosalie's?
It was fantastic to hear Rosalie thank so many in their speech, and of course a lot of thanks to the unions and the people that they'd worked with to form some really good policy. The Greens have started to get a reputation here in Tassie as a party that's forming really deep policy. It's not just what people think of as Greens areas like forestry and animals. It's a lot of really deep policy, and they are gaining a lot of respect.
Well, I think that she was seizing the moment. She made sure she built on the Premier's assertion that he was going to govern in minority. She knows that the Greens are the only ones who can actually deliver that simply. And the fact is that she's talking, setting the scene for what she would like to see as part of what she can get out of coming to the table. So she was very astute, I think, in positioning herself to be seen, ready to talk, but also setting the agenda about what she wanted to put on the table.
And ultimately, the Greens are the big winners tonight.
Yeah.
They've picked up potentially 3 extra seats here when they've come into this election with 2. Labor haven't been able to make the inroads that they would have really been hoping, and while the Liberals might claim to be in the best position to govern, there's ultimately nearly a 12% swing against them, which does leave the House in a very, very interesting place.
Yep.
We need to take a look at the state of the House, and that's pretty important. So, Richard, will default to you to start off with, but are we in agreement here? It looks like the Liberals got over the line with another seat, so
well,
tell us about it.
On the state of the House, if we got it at the moment, the Liberals have a 3-seat edge on the Labor Party. We think that Labor have a chance of perhaps adding a couple of seats, but then the Liberals also are in a position to probably pick up another 1 or 2 seats as well. The Greens 4, I think, is probably going to be their maximum, but as you noted, the quirks of the preference flow could even deliver a 5th seat. I think find it difficult, but it's possibly there. Jackie Lambie will probably be disappointed, but relieved if she wins 1 seat. But it's not the strong showing that we expected out of Bratton. We were fairly confident earlier on that, before the election, that there was that Jackie Lambie Network would pick up a seat in the heartland of the network in Bratton, and that's not been the case. It will probably be the case. It's certainly likely that it's there, but after that it becomes a bit problematic as to where the other seat or 2 might come from.
It almost feels a bit unfair in Herr Clark that they have delivered a pretty good electoral performance for a first time a party's run. They might get 8% in a couple of different seats, but ultimately, if the preferences don't flow, they're going to struggle to get a seat.
And one of the things that we did hear from scrutineers, that one of the weaknesses of the Jackie Lambie Network, which we pointed out in commentary before the election, was that they didn't have a full ticket. So they needed votes from other places to come in to allow them to register, not to be go to informal or exhaust. But we hear from scrutineers that ticket isn't necessarily holding together, that people have come into the ticket and are leaving it to go back to other candidates. And that is a real problem. I think that if the Jackie Lambie Network really wants to be an effective state party, they're going to have to be able to put together a full ticket in not all constituencies necessarily, but at least in enough to hold the vote together to get a quota.
And I think, assuming that the party can stay together and this is a successful 4 years or term for those 2, maybe 1, maybe 3 members that they get into Parliament, they should be pretty well placed to potentially pick up an extra seat or 2 in 4 years, because there has been a lot of discussion about Jackie Lambie not putting forward policies, rather more values and ideas and things they'd like to be talking about. With 4 years under their belt and a bit more familiarity with the Tasmanian Parliament, hopefully they can put forward a policy platform that also does allow people to make a more educated decision about them.
Well, as I said, structurally they have to get to a situation where they become a viable party, and that means having a full ticket. They also have to avoid a situation where some of their candidates say, well, yes, I don't always agree with the boss. As we've seen with the Clive Palmer, with Pauline Hanson, and other parties named after the founder. They don't always hold together very well. So you're right. They need to get beyond just what the image that the leader brings to it. They need to have policies and something that gives them coherence beyond just the leadership.
Richard, thanks very much for your thoughts and your assistance tonight. Josh, thank you to you. Thanks to all the team that have been here behind the scenes in the tally room this evening. It has been a wonderful night for all of us to be able to bring this to you. It looks like there's a lot of work to go. We're not going to know exactly where the situation is for a few days, maybe a week or 2. But that is all we have from the tally room in Hobart. Thanks for joining us. Good night.